Perfect.
Hooray, sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. Thanks for being here. Madam Coordinator, we ready to go?
Yes, we are.
Secretary Treasurer, ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Deputy Secretary Treasurer, ready to go?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So we'll begin now. Good morning and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Jocelyn Chandler, Stephen Lewis, Terrence Otto, and Martin Vervoort. My name is Fabian Poulin, and I will be chairing this hearing today. Procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear oral submissions from interested parties. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, we may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. I understand today we do not have any statutory declaration, so we'll be administering the oath to each applicant. Okay. The committee may ask for a brief presentation on the application, followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. Finally, before we begin, we have 2 items to address. Does any member present need to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today or that are on agenda of another committee panel? Members, Mr. Otto?
No, thank you.
Mr.
Nope.
Report?
No.
Mr. Lewis? Ms.
No.
Chandler?
No.
Thank you. We don't have any minutes of the last public hearing to address. We will now hear the application schedules for this hearing, and we'll first deal with any items that may be adjourned. Is there anyone present who wishes to address an adjournment of one of the applications scheduled for this hearing? Are there any adjournment requests, Coordinator?
No, we have not received any adjournment requests.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the first application. Application is having to do with 5673 Fourth Line Road. Consent to convey a portion of the property to the abutting landowner to the north, known municipally as 5623 Fourth Line Road. Mr. Polton, are you in the house? Mr. Polton? Somebody has to unmute him. Mr. Chown, are you representing instead of Mr. Polton?
Ryan will be joining the call and he will be making a presentation with respect to the applications, and then I wouldn't mind the opportunity to speak to the conditions after Mr. Polton has made his presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, that's Ryan. I just had to unmute myself. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, so I'm Ryan Polton. I'm a planner at Novatech. I'm representing the owners of the property. And with me today, as who just spoke, is Marie Chown, Director of Planning at Novatech. So I'll be presenting this application. This is a new application to sever the surplus farm dwelling at 5673 Fourth Line Road through a lot addition application. This is the second application for this property. The first application was heard in February. I do have some slides I provided for this, just to illustrate the property, where it is, its boundaries. So it's an internal lot. It's primarily an agricultural field between Fourth Line Road, Third Line Road, Brophy Road, and Century Road West. The next slide shows our consent sketch. So the first application that was filed included all the lands to be retained, as well as the field that fronts onto Fourth Line Road that's immediately south of the woodlot. There was a discussion on the first application as to whether this field constituted agricultural land. Ultimately, that application was refused. This new application includes the land for that field to be added to the existing agricultural parcel at 5623 Fourth Line Road. So this new application addresses the concerns from the city regarding the first application.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, Ryan. We do need to get the statutory declaration on this file.
Okay.
Okay, my apologies. So before we proceed, I'll administer the oath. There we go. Mr. Polton, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Please proceed.
Okay. So this new application would include all of the agricultural land south of the existing building, as well as the woodlot, and then also the field that fronts onto Fourth Line Road, as to lands to be added to the existing agricultural parcel at 5623 Fourth Line Road. The property is designated agricultural resource area and is zoned for agricultural uses. This new parcel that's to be retained has been designed to meet the minimum lot area for the existing kennel on the property. So its size has been minimized as per the uses that's on the land today. Through this consent application for a lot addition, there'll be no land use changes. There's no rezoning proposed, and there are no minor variances associated with this consent application. As detailed in my covering letter for the application, the proposed consent application is consistent with the criteria in the Planning Act for this lot addition and the policies of the PPS. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Polton. Ms. Turkington, do you have any comments on behalf of the city?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. City staff have had an opportunity to review the revised proposal for 5673 Fourth Line Road and are satisfied that the intent of the official plan and the zoning bylaw are maintained and have no concerns with the application. Staff would note that the crop plan within the retained parcel at the rear of the kennel is understood to be not currently utilized as cropland, as there's a geothermal unit below which heats the kennel. Staff have no further comments.
Thank you very much. I'll ask the panel if they have any comments. Ms. Chandler, any comments or questions?
No, no comments.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any comments or questions? You need to unmute yourself.
Mr. Chair, just while you're waiting for Mr. Lewis, I just want to remind the chair and committee, I'd like to speak about the conditions.
We'll get to those in just as soon as we get the panel to have their opportunity to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go on to Mr. Vervoort. Mr. Lewis is having some audio difficulties. Any comments or questions, Mr. Vervoort?
Just for understanding, Building Code Services indicated you wanted a distance agreement, which need to apply in this zoning development.
Mr. Vervoort, very difficult to hear your question. If you could move closer to your mic.
Sorry about that. I just had a question about Building Code Services that commented on the requirement for a limiting distance agreement. I'm not sure that that's applicable in this case. I just wanted planning to comment on that if you could.
Ms. Turkington? Oh, there you are. Ms. Turkington, did you hear Mr. Vervoort's question? Not having any luck. She looks to be frozen.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of the comment that's being referred to. I'm not sure that we've seen that.
Madam Coordinator, do you have a copy of the comment from Building Code Services that you could put up onto the screen?
Yeah, just give me a minute, please.
I apologize about that. My internet connection cut out.
That's fine. Did you hear Mr. Vervoort's comment?
I did not. Apologies.
No problem. Mr. Vervoort, could you repeat your comment?
Sure. It was just a comment from Building Code Services regarding a distance agreement for unprotected openings. I'm not sure that would apply in this case because we're doing a lot line adjustment.
Staff in the planning department cannot comment on building code services conditions and comments.
Thank you.
Okay.
I see it's only a comment, not a condition, isn't it?
That's correct. Mr. Chown, there you see the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the existing buildings are a significant distance from the proposed lot line, so I can't imagine that this is an issue. I'm actually surprised by the comment.
It's not part of the conditions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Lewis, are you able to comment or have any questions?
Yeah, I'm good to go now. I would not worry about the building code services comment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments or questions? You're muted, Mr. Otto. There you go.
I'm okay with it. How's that?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chown, do you want to comment on the conditions?
Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We have no concern with the first condition, which relates to the appeal that was filed on the original decision of the committee, subject to this application being being approved by the committee and not being appealed. And our clients who filed that appeal to LPAT will withdraw that appeal. We have no concerns with condition 2, which deals with the merging of the severed parcel with the property to the north. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what I wanted to chat about briefly was conditions 3 and 4. Unfortunately, we haven't had the time to speak with Ms. Turkington. We had a quick email exchange with her yesterday on these conditions. I was considering making a fairly lengthy presentation about standard conditions, but I note that the Secretary Treasurer is sitting in on this meeting today, and I think I will save that higher level conversation for another day between himself, planning staff, and representatives of the industry about standard conditions. So specifically, as these two conditions relate to the applications before you today, condition 3 is a condition that the committee normally applies to any application where we're creating a new building lot. That's not the case today. So my first position is they shouldn't be applying the condition at all. If the committee is so inclined, though, I could understand applying this condition to the retained parcel. It doesn't make any sense to apply it to the severed parcel because the severed parcel doesn't represent the entirety of the ownership to the north, so that you would have notice only on a piece of that property and not all of the property. And you can't impose a condition on the balance of that property to the north. it's not before the committee today. So if the committee feels that this condition is appropriate to be applied to the existing house on the retained parcel, so be it. But if you could amend the condition so it applies only to the retained parcel. And the same with condition number 4, which is notice to landowners that they're located in an agricultural resource area. Once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I don't see that it makes any sense at all to apply that condition to the severed parcel. The severed parcel is being conveyed to a bona fide farmer. I don't think you need to notify a bona fide farmer that his property is located in an agricultural resource area. And once again, if you were to impose the condition on the severed parcel, it would actually only apply to a piece or a portion of the lands to the north, which would make no sense. So once again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, if you're inclined to impose this condition, I'd ask that that it be applied only to the retained parcel where the existing house is located. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Turkington, can I ask you to respond?
Mr. Chair, staff included both conditions 3 and 4 as they are standard conditions included with surplus farm dwelling severances, including the quality and quantity of groundwater covenant on title. Staff would note that with respect to the groundwater covenant, it is usually determined at the time that the development agreement is being prepared by legal services as to whether it will apply to both the severed and retained, the severed, or just the retained lands, which is why the condition does not specifically reference either the severed or the retained lands. It was noted in an email exchange yesterday to the applicant that it would apply to the severed lands, and that further discussion could be had at the time that the development agreement was being prepared by the city's legal services department. With respect to condition 4, staff requested that it apply to both the severed and the retained lands, given that the severed lands have an opportunity to be developed with a detached dwelling and potentially severed via surplus farm dwelling severance application further in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Chown, any rebuttal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still think that there's a legal problem with attaching these conditions to the severed parcel because the severed parcel is being added to the property to the north, and you can't register, the committee has no authority to oppose a condition on the property to the north because it's not subject to this application. So that the notices under conditions 3 and 4 would never be applied to the entirety of that property. And I don't think they're appropriate in any event for a farming operation to notify them that they're located in an agricultural resource area. The question about a potential future surplus dwelling application on the property north is something the committee can deal with down the road if and when it ever happens.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any comments?
Sorry. No, I would agree with, I think in this instance, it makes sense what Mr. Chown is proposing. I think the condition should apply to the retained lands only. Conditions 3 and 4.
Thank you. Any comments, Ms. Chandler? Not hearing you.
I'm in agreement with Mr. Vervoort.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Me too. If it's being zoned ag, there's going to be no need for building on it anyway, right? I agree with Mr.
Thank
Vervoort.
you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments, questions?
Mr. Vervoort seems to be correct in this one. I agree with him.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask the committee to approve this application subject to the conditions 3 and 4 pertaining to only the retained lands. All in favor? Your application is approved, Mr. Poulton.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
You're welcome. Thank you. Move on to application number 2. This application concerns 1145 Carp Road. Looking for minor variances to permit a reduced percentage of the lot width within 3 meters of the front line to be occupied by building walls and reduced driveway width for a double traffic lane for the construction of a new 4-story low-rise apartment building. Is Mr. Scott Allais available?
Present, Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning. I believe the coordinator has my presentation, so I'm prepared to go through it if the committee
Sure.
wishes that. Otherwise, I'll wait for your direction.
Yep, we'll do that in just 1 second. Because there was no statutory declaration provided, we have to administer an oath. Are you
Great.
prepared to do that now, sir?
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, please proceed with a brief discussion of your application today.
Thank you. So to give a brief background, the proposal before you today is related to a site plan control application that is ongoing. It is now in the late stages, and aside from the issues we've brought to you today, the remaining issues are not so much of a planning nature, but more related to servicing and engineering matters. The proposal in specific is to add this building, as you see on the elevations, to an existing lot, which presently has a 2-story commercial building on it, most known for the dentist on the building. So essentially what the proposal is to use unutilized land on the site and establish this building. It is located on an arterial main street, both from a zoning perspective and from a official plan perspective. And the first variance actually relates to that. So if the coordinator can quickly go to slide 2, just for context. So this is the corner it's at. It's Carp Road and Hazeldean Road. It's of course the shaded portion. In the, I guess, southeast corner, you can see the established building. And in the southwest corner, you can see where we're proposing to build. There is presently a small single detached home on there within the trees, and that will be removed as part of the proposal. If the coordinator can please now go to slide 3. So these are the 2 variances that we're bringing before you. The first one has to do with an arterial main street requirement, which is that 50% of the lot width within 3 meters of the front lot line must be occupied by building walls if the lot is less than 90 meters wide. And then there's another provision which increases it to 5 meters, where portions of the building wall are affected by power lines. So our requested relief is to vary it to require 0% of the lot width within 5 meters of the front line to be occupied by building walls. And I'll explain the nature of this after I note the next variance, which is a driveway providing access to a parking lot or parking garage must have a minimum width of 6.7 meters for a double traffic lane. We are requesting that instead the double traffic driveway be 6 meters. And this is just one of the driveway accesses, and the remainder will be 6.7. We can have the next slide, please. So this is a graphic I prepared just to kind of give a bit of context. So given the existing context, it's essentially impossible to develop on this land in a manner that respects the arterial main street provision noted. And the reason is, if you see the shaded part there, that's a hydro easement. Of course, it's an active hydro line. And it chops off a significant part of the corner and essentially removes a large portion of the land that would be available to contribute to this building wall frontage along the arterial main street. You'll also note the existing 2-story building, which is a active, viable business and is intended to remain. That building is also set back further than the required distance, and it's about 6 meters rather than the 5, and it's intended for that to remain. Another complication is the access, which is of course between the 2 buildings. That's existing and that's proposed to remain, and that also makes it very difficult to meet this provision. So in place of this, we've done what we can to meet all the other arterial and main street zoning and official plan requirements, and we've done our best to enclose the street and provide a street presence as much as is viable given these constraints. The second variance, as shown here, is for the driveway, and that's, of course, it's labeled just north of the proposed building. So this has been an existing condition, this driveway, for since at least 1965, according to aerial photos. And this access actually, I believe it's about 4.85 meters wide presently. We're widening it as much as we can to 6 meters, which has been demonstrated as doable for things such as planned unit developments. And is still viable for the fire route. And as noted, the remainder of the aisles will be 6.7 meters. The difficulty here is providing a viable building code compliant footprint for the apartment building, while also respecting the distance required from the hydro easement. So this footprint, as you can see, is kind of maximizing the space and positioning that you can achieve while respecting the hydro easement and providing a safe access. So in this regard, we've proposed the 6 meters. If I can get the 5th slide, please. This is just to kind of demonstrate the hydro wires as they are a constraint. So they kind of go across the corner of the property, and then there's a smaller hydro line again. You can see the existing building there, the dentist, that is also restricted by hydro lines. And I'll also note that when that dentist was established, it was prior to the arterial Main Street zoning coming into effect. So it's legal non-complying in that regard. And without belaboring you with the details, I'll leave it to questions if you would like more clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Allais. I'd like to call on Mr. Walker to present the city's point of view.
Morning, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the proposal and has no concerns with it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, just one. That is a very busy area in Stittsville with sort of the main access out to the Queensway. Which is your main entrance? Is it going to be off Carp Road or Hazeldean Road?
So Hazeldean Road is the main entrance, and that I appreciate that question because the proposed variance for the north access is due to the fact that it's supposed to be in a way subordinate in terms of its use. So it's a right in, right out on Hazeldean. Given, as you noted, the complex nature of the intersection, we're not proposing any full turn access here. And yes, so essentially it is expected that the majority of traffic will use the Hazeldean access.
So to follow that up, so when you come out on Hazeldean, if you're coming out of there, you gotta go right. And if you're coming in, you've got to go past. Now on Carp Road, is it not the same? You can't, I don't think you can make a left turn if you're coming out onto Carp Road, can you?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There's a median there.
So how do people, if they want to go the other way, they drive over into the mall and swing around in there and back out?
I suppose that's a route that they can approach.
I don't know. I've got a nice building and it's certainly a need for it, but I can see the traffic being a schmozzle. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Chandler, any questions or comments?
Just a couple things that I'm curious about. Could the coordinator put the site plan back up on the screen?
Just so you know, coordinator, slide 7 has a site plan version without the markup.
Oh, I like the markup.
Oh, okay, well then there you go, no problem.
Okay, well, I'll ask one question that doesn't require it. The hydro easement that you're working around that normally requires a 5-meter setback for a high voltage easement. Is that a high voltage easement?
So we are providing a 5-meter setback from the hydro easement beyond the hydro easement where the actual line terminates, of course, not from the property line as well.
Okay, so that's, all right, that's what I didn't quite capture that. All right, so there is the 5 meters off of it. It's just the road frontage issue.
That's right.
Okay. And mostly from a curiosity in terms of aesthetics, what's going to happen in that rather large swath of a hydro easement?
In terms of landscaping or in terms
Well,
of...
yeah, I mean, there's some fairly large trees on that property now. But
Right.
on the other hand, I know there's generally a preference of the city to get some building frontage on those roads. So the plan is...
That's something that's, of course, that we're dealing with ongoing in the site plan control process.
Okay, so that's part of what you're working on with the city right now.
Right.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any comments or questions?
No, I think we're our role here today is just to deal with the 2 requested variances, and everything else I think will be dealt with through the site plan process, which I understand is ongoing and in its final stages, according to Mr. Alain. So I have no concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments, questions, or concerns?
I
Unmute.
guess I agree with Mr. Vervoort. The only thing is there enough room for fire trucks to get in there if there is a future problem?
Mr. Chair, the fire route is identified as it would come in through Hazeldean Road and continues through Carp Road, and there's no active concerns from the fire department in terms of this access being workable for their trucks.
Any other questions, Mr. Otto?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
On that same vein, taking into consideration Mr. Lewis's comments about Carp Road and the median that separates those coming, I guess, south on the property, towards the property, where is the fire station?
Truthfully, I don't know off the top of my head where the nearest fire station is.
Because in both cases, they'd have to cross a median if they're coming down that road from Carp Road.
I see.
So I guess it's been taken into consideration by the city. You've checked out with the fire department.
Yeah, they've been circulated as required.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments, Mr. Walker? I think not. You've already told us that everything is fine. From the perspective of the panel, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor? Your application is approved, Mr. Alain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. We'll move on to application number 3, having to do with 3735 Becks Road. Mr. Shipman is the agent on file. Mr. Shipman, are you here? Need to unmute Mr. Shipman.
I am.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Shipman.
Good morning.
Since we did not have a statutory declaration on file, we need to administer an oath. Are you able to do that now?
I am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I do.
Thank you. Would you please give us a brief presentation of your application this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a fairly straightforward lot line adjustment. We're taking 15.5 hectares of vacant rural land now attached to 3735 Becks Road and attaching it to adjacent property also owned by the applicants on the corner of Kinburn and Becks Road. There will be no site changes or new development occurring as a result of approval of this application. We're also looking to retain a minor easement across what we're calling the severed parcel in order to provide access to a solar array that's on the larger acreage that's being added to the adjacent property, which in fact is the reason why this application has these severed and retained parcels kind of flipped. The reason for that being we're just simply wishing to avoid submitting a secondary application and the costs associated with that. So this is a lot line adjustment, and as I say, there's no changes or no conflicts with the official plan, provincial policy statement, or zoning bylaw. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, do you have any comments on behalf of the city?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the application and has no concerns with the lot line adjustment. It is important to note that in this case, it's just a lot line adjustment and there will not be a new lot created. Staff has no further comments at this time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask our conservation partners if they have any comments or questions.
The Conservation Authority has reviewed this application and has no concerns with the proposal. Just as a best management practice, we do recommend maintaining a vegetated buffer along the water course on the property.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. I'd like to now ask the committee if they have any comments or questions. Mr. Otto, any comments, questions?
No comments, thank you.
Mr. Vervoort, any comments or questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any comments or questions?
None. I agree with Mr. Walker.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, any comments or questions?
None.
So I would like to ask the committee, there being no other further comments or questions, there's only one condition, which is the standard lot line adjustment condition. I ask yes, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Shipman.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment in the condition that's proposed that in each paragraph where it refers to the severed parcel, that should probably refer to the retained parcel. It's again a little mix up because I've flipped the severed and retained parcels. I would also ask that the reference plan condition, well, apply to the severed parcel in this case, so we're good there.
Okay, Mr. Walker, would you make some comments about that, if you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Mr. Shipman. I think in this case, that's the appropriate route to take.
Thank you very much. So with those changes in the conditions, I would ask the panel now to vote in favor of this application. All those in favor? Your application is approved, Mr. Shipman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to our last application for the day, and it is having to do with 304 Riverwood Drive. And Mr. Scott Irwin is the agent on file for this. Mr. Irwin, are you here? Mr. Irwin, you need to unmute your mic.
Hi, sorry, I was just, my computer was just rebooting.
No worries. So we did not receive a statutory declaration. I need to administer an oath to you today on that. Are you available? Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I do swear, yeah.
Thank you very much. Would you give us a brief overview of your application this morning?
Yes, we're looking for a variance for distance to high water mark. This is a pretty tricky lot. It's very small, and in order to get the house to fit, single family house, I needed to push it back instead of wide on the lot to fit the septic in and the house. We've got a grade difference from the underside of, or the top of slab to the high water mark of about 10 meters.
Okay. Is that your presentation, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Walker, do you have any comments, questions, or on behalf of the city?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the application and has no concerns with the proposal. Staff is of the opinion that the requested variance would not introduce any greater impact on the environmental quality of the watercourse, nor would it introduce any risk of hazards to the users of the property. Staff is satisfied that the four tests are met in this case.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions. Mr. Otto, any questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Chandler, any questions or comments?
I would be curious to hear from Mississippi Valley regarding, there was an adjacent property owner who had a concern about, they referred to it as a berm. I suspect it's just riprap. Could you speak to that?
Were you directing that to me?
Ms. Ogden from the Conservation Partner.
Through you, Chair. Yes, the Conservation Authority has received an application under our regulation for development on the property, and included with that proposal is a retaining wall along the property lines and the Ottawa River.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps the agent would also like to address the concerns of the adjacent property owner.
So yeah, we've designed the site to have a retaining wall across the property to mitigate any slope issues.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Vervoort, any questions or comments?
A question for Mr. Irwin and possibly planning as well. When I look at the, maybe the coordinator can put up the plan showing the location of the building.
It was very difficult to hear your comment, Mr. Vervoort.
Right.
Quite often.
Maybe the plan about the site plan. I think it was the other one showing the building on the property that it was that one. My question for planning is, how does the driveway work? It doesn't seem long enough to actually park a car before you're on the city property based on the lot line. Perhaps Mr. Walker can speak first.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I missed that. Can Mrs. Revert repeat that?
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the length of the driveway because it doesn't appear long enough to actually park a car before you're over the actual lot line of city property.
So the department has reviewed the proposal and have no concerns with the location or length of the driveway. It complies with the provisions within Part 4 of the zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any questions or comments?
A question, was this always a vacant lot or was there a building of some sort there beforehand?
It was a vacant lot.
Okay, thank you. I have no problems with it.
Mr. Irwin, are you aware that the department has provided additional information to you having to do with a complete review of the grading servicing for the building permit process? That's one item. The second item, at the time of the building permit, grading plan prepared by professional engineer was required. And any proposed works to be located within the road allowance requires prior written approval. And the fourth item is properties located within Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. It's suggested that you contact the MVCA about a permit that may be required. Are you aware of those additional information?
I am, and they've all been, they're in the process of being taken care of.
Thank you. There being no further comments or questions, I ask the committee to approve this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Irwin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Any further business to be had? I don't believe so. Madam Coordinator, I think that's it for today.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much, everyone.